Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to our presentations. Thank you very much for your patience. I don't think we had any old business pending out there, so so sorry to keep you waiting so long, but I do appreciate very much you hanging with us. So without further ado, Mandy Honest.
My name is Mandy Honest. I work with the municipal clerk's office. And I brought with me to introduce because you all and your community councils work with them. So Liza Spano works with me in the clerk's office. She has been sending you guys your notice emails about alcohol and marijuana licensing. And then I also have Elizabeth Appleby with us. She's from the planning department. So I wanted her to come and help if there was any kinds of questions with the special land use permit side of this. So I have handouts to hand out to you, but I apologize. They printed real tiny. So we have electronic versions that I submitted. And so we can email them to you. So hopefully those will go better, but I will leave these.
I did drop them in the Zoom chat for those online, and then
alcohol,
they are on our website.
and then this is a marijuana. So these are just, flow charts that I created to kind of give a general overview of the process. I have little notes on the side that, are for specifically the community councils to know when certain things happen, when you're solicited for comments. So that's, again, I apologize, it's so tiny. So I wanted to come and talk to you all because we've recently had some community councils contact the clerk's office and ask about some of the processes for the licensing, how they can interact with their local government, with the community council activities to the assembly, if there's questions or concerns about a potential license for alcohol or marijuana in your areas. So first of all, I just kind of wanted to give everybody either a refresher course, or if you're new, go over the information, high level of just kind of what you see, what you can expect to see. And then kind of give you a little bit more detail on where your input comes into play for the assembly and in the process. So for the first one, this is the overview of the alcohol license. Kind of high level, it starts with AMCO, which is the Alcohol Marijuana Control Office. All licenses for alcohol and marijuana start with the state. The local governments get the opportunity to weigh in and submit comments, and that's something that we send notice to community councils for. Any kind of comments we receive from you, we attach to the packet that the assembly reviews, and that goes to the state. So you'll see it starts here. Community councils, I want to say about 2 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 now, because of input from councils, changed our internal processes for noticing, because of your meetings being so spread out sometimes because summers are off. We tried to change our noticing to you all to give you the max amount of notice on alcohol licenses that we have as well. So as soon as we receive a notice from the state that there's a proposed alcohol license, so they've deemed this application complete, they sent us the notice, we immediately send you all the notice. And so you have the same 60 days that the local government has to review, to submit comments to the assembly that we then would relay to the state. So that's, we call it a courtesy notice. You get it by email. Our communications come to you all through the council president emails that are on the FCC website. So I've noticed it's been updated a lot more frequently, which is very much appreciated. That's our point of contact. So if that's where we send it and it's not updated, that's really hard to get you guys the information.
So if your board changes, let us know as soon as possible.
Yes, yeah. And so you get that courtesy notice right off the bat. And it lets you know when we anticipate that it will go before the assembly. So you have kind of an idea. And typically we give you the max amount of time where it's the 60 days and then the closest assembly meeting prior to that 60 days. So that's kind of our general process for any of the licenses. That gives the municipality the max amount of time to do reviews, to check for any public safety concerns, to allow the community and the community councils to submit comments. And so throughout that process, we work with the application, reviewing it. We work with the departments. They do their specific reviews for safety, fire, health, all of the different departments can weigh in. And then we send a second notice to the councils to let them know, yes, for sure, this is the meeting that it's gonna be at. You have this amount of time to submit comments. And so anything we receive up to the night before the meeting, we can put into print. If it's the day of the meeting, we encourage you as a council, you have the opportunity to go to the meeting and speak on any items. A lot of times you'll see assembly memorandums. We do our licenses for alcohol in two ways. Once we do our review process, if all of the departments say they're good based off of the code requirements for their section, they comply with fire, they comply with health, etc. We put it as a recommendation to waive protest before the assembly. So that said, the assembly is the ultimate reviewer. They're the ones that either passes it or decides that they want to do some sort of other action. But based off of our reviews, we send these proposals before the assembly. So you would get notice of that. You would get a copy of the assembly memorandum stating, we didn't find anything wrong with this application. So we recommend waive protest. And then if we receive any kind of comments, those would be attached to that application that goes before the assembly as well. Separately, because it's 60 days, it's kind of a narrow time to review. So if we don't have enough time to review, departments don't get back to us, there are issues, you'll see a resolution. The resolutions are, we call them conditional protests. So that allows us to lodge a protest to the state based on either they haven't complied with an inspection yet. And so those conditional protests allow the state to put a 180-day abeyance on the license instead of denying it. So you would get a notice of that as well. Those are always going to be public hearing items. And so you would get notice that these are public hearing items, have the opportunity to come to the assembly meeting and speak. Community council representatives get the 5 minutes, everybody else gets 3. And so all of these things are in these notice emails that you all receive. So I kind of have on some of the next slides, just some of the examples of the emails. Like I said, Liza deals with alcohol, so you get lots of emails from her. So this is just kind of generally what they look like. You'll see your notice, you'll see just the detailed information about what it is, your attachments. This one, I just wanted to put in because we do an annual notice to all community councils of anticipated renewals. You got that recently. We have to send it before September 1st. So this one is kind of fresh. It gives the councils kind of a heads up for the next year. We anticipate receiving these applications. If you all have any concerns with a licensed establishment in your area, this is the time to start acting on it. And so you kind of get those heads up, like I said, other emails. This is just kind of some of the same email notices that you guys see. So I'll stop here and just let you know, for alcohol, some of the questions that we've had is about where councils fit into the process when it comes to problem operators or concerns. So like I said, that first notice at September I think we tried to send it mid-October or mid-August, but we rely heavily on community councils input for your areas. We can put all of the comments that we receive into the packet and put them before the assembly. We can compile a history that way. But if we don't receive comments from councils, it's very hard to protest an establishment right off the bat. These have to be protested and they can't be arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable per state statute. And so we have to show reasonable cause why this license is being protested. So that comes very heavily from the comments of the community members that live around it and see things and can provide detailed documentation. So that said, we receive comments anytime. If you all have, or your councils or your community members have questions or concerns, you can send them to the clerk's office anytime and we compile all of this. They all go before the assembly, they see these things. But the more documentation we can compile, the better a case the municipality would have to deal with a problem operator. And so that's kind of the big thing I wanted to relay for the licensing portion. And kind of similar with the marijuana. So I'm kind of the point person for the marijuana licenses. The weird difference with alcohol and marijuana is marijuana, there is also a municipal license requirement. So all of the same things that happen with alcohol, there's a state marijuana license. We do the same thing. You'll receive the email notices. We receive a notice from the state. We let you all know. We have the opportunity to collect comments and protest the state license, but separately, the municipality has power over its own marijuana license. And so the assembly can deny those licenses, and without both, the operator can't continue. So same thing with noticing. You'll see the emails. I send an annual notice of anticipated renewals every year. Very similar process. So these are all kind of your standard applications. And where Elizabeth comes in for the special land use permit, that's going to be kind of a one and done. If an establishment doesn't have a land use permit to do that activity, and it's like any other land use permit, if there's a use for a building and it changes its use type. So if it was a daycare, they go out of business, and some other type of business like a bar wants to go in there, they have to change the use type of that building. So that's a whole process that the planning department deals with. And they have their own process of noticing community councils. Councils have the opportunity to comment. And that also goes before the assembly for approval ultimately. And so I will if there's any questions on that, I will divert those to Elizabeth. But the big thing too with the special land use permits for marijuana and alcohol, I had a question about this, and this is something that we're kind of trying to clarify in a rewrite for the marijuana licensing code. The special land use permit for marijuana requires those community meetings for new applicants. And this is a requirement of the land use permit. It's required in code. That was something different that was done for marijuana that alcohol doesn't have. And so, unfortunately, that's not something that we have to force businesses to do for alcohol. It's not a requirement. It's not something that we check for. It's something that we encourage them to do. And so that, I think there's been a little bit of confusion with, because we were going to regulate marijuana like alcohol, same, but a little different. And so that's one of the big things that I wanted to point out and maybe push down is the special land use permit is going to be different for that purpose for alcohol. And for renewals on marijuana and alcohol, we don't require them to do community meetings with each application. So these are things that we encourage the councils and licensees to get relationships going so that that's something that you can continue and have those open lines of communications. But that was something I wanted to point out for some of the differences because we've had questions for that before.
Thank you. I appreciate you noting that. When marijuana was legalized and the licensure became possible, there was a requirement that dispensaries in a certain council area enter into like a good neighbor agreement or memorandum of understanding with that community council that stated, the points of contact, the steps they would go through to resolve issues before escalating, that kind of thing. I know in Mountain View, we've done that with our dispensaries. Obviously, marijuana dispensaries are not limited by population the way that alcohol is. And given that we've had a shrinking population for decades, we're not likely to see a new dispensary alcohol license, beverage dispensary happen in the next decade or so. Are those agreements still required for operators? Is that requirement to have one of those still enforced? I don't know if that was a SLUP or CUP.
Yeah, so, it's all SLUPs now, that's all the special land use permits. The cup came from the conditional use permit, which was old code. And now even for downtown, there was a portion where it was not covering downtown. Now all of the muni is covered with the new Title 21. And so yes, in Title 21, it is still a requirement for the marijuana special land use permit applicants to have a community meeting. And so it doesn't have to be with the community council. That should be the first option per Title 21. But if the council isn't meeting in a timely manner, if like you're on break for summer, the applicant has an opportunity to do a community meeting another way. They just have to provide documentation of why they had to do that. But the same noticing, they'd have to notice, is it 1,000 feet?
It's 500 feet, and I can.
Yeah, I'm right,
respond to the MOU
Elizabeth,
question, too,
take
'cause
off
I
with that one.
anticipated that, so I have like the MOU, I would right in front of me.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the marijuana SLUPs, they had to have a community meeting, like Mandy said. First choice is community council. If they do not have it with the community council, they have to provide an explanation why. They have to send notice, it's generally 500 feet, but it's also 50 parcels, so some of the less urban areas, sometimes the distance can increase to get to 50 parcels. But they're required to send out that notice to property owners and residents that they're having this community meeting, whether it's ends up being one with the council or one that they organize separately. As far as the MOU, so for retail sales establishments, it's they're encouraged to engage in neighborhood responsibility planning. They need to include a report on the status of their community engagement efforts. A copy of an informal memorandum of understanding or MOU outlining what they've concurred with the community council may be included with the application. But if they can opt to not have an MOU, they can say in the absence of an MOU, they can explain their community engagement efforts. So it's sort of like the requirement where you're through your community meeting, or it does give an option if they're having trouble getting an MOU signed with the community council for whatever reason, like maybe it's over the summer where they aren't meeting. So specifically for the retail sales, it's encouraged but not required to have a signed MOU with the community council. One other thing I'll pinpoint, what Mandy said is, for an existing establishment, if there's issues, those would generally be responded to by code enforcement, and the most common one for marijuana tends to be odor, and documentation is important, so just encourage if you want to make a report, document it, like time, date that you smell the odor, things like that. And if there's not a record just to accurate that you don't really have anything to go on, even if you, even if you brought it to your council and you need some sort of record of that.
yeah, I think the biggest thing, really is gonna be it's a legal process. The license is a right, and so in order to take it away from someone, if there's substantial reason to, it hasn't happened much. I've been with the muni a little over 9 years. And I've seen 3 licenses die. So it is very uncommon to get to that level where the applicant refuses to work with the council or the community. They refuse to comply with an MOU that they've signed. There's other issues with it, so it's typically gets resolved before that point. But a lot of that resolution comes from the councils being engaged and working with them and being diligent to document if they're not complying with an MOU. And for alcohol, they're not required to do an MOU, but you can still work with them, reach out to them, invite them to meetings. And documenting whether they come or not, and the engagement that the council has tried to have with the operator to show their due diligence to try and remedy the issue. And so that's kind of one of the biggest things that I think the councils are very important for. You all live in these areas, you see the daily impacts. The municipality is very much a complaint-based system. And so if you complain, we can compile that and we can create a record. But if we don't receive those, it's very hard to have a case to show it's worth protesting a license without that history. So that's something I think was some of the questions we've had from councils through emails and through some meetings, and so wanted to try and come and relay that to all councils to let you know it is. I know we've heard some frustrations that nothing seems to get done when you complain, or when you submit concerns. It's a slow process, unfortunately. And the few that we've seen, you know, it's taken sometimes years. So not to be depressing on it, but really most of the work and most of the stuff the municipality relies on you guys for. And so I just wanted to come and encourage you all to stay active in it and to keep communicating with us. And that's kind of going to be the biggest help for us and for the councils and the neighborhoods to deal with any concerned operators or establishments.
We have a quick question from University Area Community Council.
Yes, thank you for coming. Last spring, I believe it was, we had a request for a new marijuana facility on Rose Street off Northern Lights near Boniface. And we protested it because it fell within the I think it was 1,000 feet from a elementary school and the Anchorage headquarters. And we did a resolution sent to the state and to the mayor and 7 people and everybody else. We have never heard back from that as far as I know. Does that mean it didn't go anywhere?
Do you know the name of the establishment by any chance?
I've got it in my record here. I don't want to take the time up to, you know.
Do you know that?
I think I know that one.
It was on Rose Street near Northern Lights.
Yes, yeah, so that one, we have not received an application for.
Is that the no limits?
You know, I don't remember the name, I think that's it.
Okay,
I just remember it was that Rose Street near, I remember it was near Northern Light, so I believe that's the one you're asking about.
okay.
I still have the communication from the University Area Community Council in my office, but I have not received an application. I've been doing, I've taken over the marijuana, I think for just about 1.5 years now. But there's at least, the ones I've seen have actually been caught in the outreach they're required to do before they even submit an application, where there's 1 or 2 other ones that I know of where they've met with the community council, and based on feedback, they have not submitted an application. So, but in the case of that one, to answer your question, we have not received an application, so there's nothing formal to comment on or review.
Thank you. Bernard had a question?
I do. So what is the responsibility of the community council, so like, we get your emails. Hooray, and before it was like, thanks. But like, what's our responsibility once we receive those emails? Is it on us to reach out to that establishment to set up an MOU? Is it on them to reach out to us?
It's on them.
Okay,
Yeah, it's on the applicants. So for marijuana only.
okay.
So if it's a new application for a special land use permit, they are responsible to reaching out and setting up the community meeting. So they should contact you guys and work with your schedule and try and get on.
And so for alcohol, would I reach out to them and be like, hey, welcome to the neighborhood?
We
Here's
have
something we should
some
do.
community councils that do that, yes. So, they won't. Alcohol will not reach out to you because they're not required to. They may, which would be fantastic. And we do encourage them to communicate with the neighborhood that they're going into, try and develop that relationship. But again, they're not required by us or by the state. And so for alcohol, if it's one that you guys want to take on, I know that the Downtown Community Council has developed a alcohol and marijuana subcommittee. And they're very active with reaching out
Yeah.
to both
They have special rules too, right?
for the downtown area.
Yeah,
Their
They do for
licenses.
alcohol.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's area restrictions specifically for alcohol in the downtown area.
yeah.
So yeah, so
And if they don't fulfill the requirements of the MOU, but it's for things like they didn't come to the number of meetings they said they would go to. But like, there's no problems at the establishment, is that still something we should document and report?
I think
Or is it
the
like,
discretion of the councils.
Okay.
I mean, if you guys feel like it's worth, I mean, I feel like it's worth documenting if you feel like it's becoming a problem where that led to bigger problems, it's worth documenting stuff. But it's kind of, I think, at the discretion of how your relationship goes with them. Anything that you submit, anything that the applicant submits, anything that the public submits to the clerk's office regarding one of those, we will attach it to the application. So we have no discretion on what, like, if we receive it, it gets sent to the assembly for their review. So that's kind of up to you guys, what you want to include in your packets to go before the assembly for their review.
As a former council president, many years who dealt with a licensee, and we actually, I think Fairview and Mountain View had a lot of experience in this. I think Spenard actually had some too, many years ago with an operator, but if you are having a problem operator and you put them on your agenda and you invite them, they don't show, that's documentation. If you have licenses that come up in batch every year, like multiple licensees, you can put on your agenda, renewal licenses. And if no one has a problem, you can just leave it, or you can do what Mountain View often does, which is to adopt a resolution of non-objection and forward it to the municipality. If they love to see stuff like that, hey, no problems, put it in the assembly's packet and it sails through. And it also evidences a record of working with operators, that you're not always just complaining. Community councils are actually spelled out in state statute, which is kind of cool because, we don't exist in a lot of places officially, right? But we exist when it comes to alcohol laws. And anytime there's, I think, a change of ownership of 10% or more of a license, or if it's changing from one council area to another, there's a required notice period to both affected councils and an opportunity to provide input, which is really cool. So councils do have, when people say, oh, you're just advisory. Well, yeah, we're advisory, but we're spelled out in statute as having a right to have input. So you can always throw that back at them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is, it's on both levels too. It's the state and the muni. You can send the same correspondence to the state that you send to the muni for the same application. Anything that I have received and that Liza receives, our office really makes an effort to, we have a whole group of enforcement that we send any kind of complaints to. So the state gets the same stuff that we get, APD gets it, code enforcement gets it. So we any kind of complaints or any kind of concerns about an area, we send that off to all of them, so everybody's on the same page. And that creates part of the record too. So you have that opportunity to send to the state and the city for those.
Any more questions? Carol and then Kathy, and then I think we're past time, so I do apologize. Carol, go ahead.
Question is, since a Kootenai native village, the land they're wanting to build their gaming hall on is, actually allotment land, and they don't pay property tax on that. But they do have a piece of land attached to it that the native village actually has. That they do pay property tax. Now, the question is, if they apply for a liquor license, which they said they didn't know if they were going to or not. Are they gonna go through you since it's allotment land?
So that is currently a question that we have circulated through legal, and it is still going through legal. There's a lot to it that they have, there's decisions that have been made by the courts that weigh into it. So at this point, I don't have a lot of information I can give on it. We don't have an application for one, so we don't have a specific location. But legal is doing a review. Well, I heard you say earlier about the building permits and all of that. I do know that legal is involved in reviewing on the building permit side as well, and we haven't had direction from them yet.
Okay,
But my understanding is that at least at this point, the state would send us the deemed complete alcohol license application if one was received. So until I get further direction from legal, that's kind of the understanding.
because the allotment land technically, my understanding, is federal. And
So it's-
the gaming.
It's a question of whether the land is being held in trust, and it's probably way too complex for us to get into. The only thing close to it would be like Metlakatla,
Yeah,
and there was a no more clause in ANCSA, where we were supposed to not have any more federal, the native claim settlement was supposed to not have any more reservations. And so in short, the village is requesting it be treated as if it's sovereign federal territory. So that they have applied with the Bureau of Indian Affairs to have it as a class 2 gaming license. And so it would probably be a question that the state of Alaska would get involved in as to whether they have enforcement of liquor laws and that sort of thing. Probably above the muni even, but definitely unsettled legal questions.
now apparently this land was designated before Anupa. And we came directly to the family that owns the land that they're going to give to the village.
The George Ondola allotment.
So that was my question.
Yeah. And yes, it is, there's a lot of legal intricacies to it.
Even the neighbors know.
Yeah, so at this time, no application. A lot of what we've had is just kind of through the newspaper articles and just through communications with the state asking kind of similar questions. And so it's in legal's arena right now. But if we were to receive something, you would receive notice of it.
And then last question before we wrap up.
Yeah, thanks for you guys attending this evening. We don't have any marijuana facilities within the Trinity Community Council. And just one liquor, well, two rivers to exclude the airport. So we're pretty isolated on all these issues. This is more anecdotal of just a citizen of Anchorage. But Trinity Community Council, myself and another board member at the time, we followed from day one when marijuana was going to become a thing and followed every meeting, every workshop, every hearing on code with regard to marijuana. And smell was a big thing and by all community and input, we don't want to smell these facilities. And for a lot, and I think that was maybe back 10 years ago. I've kind of forgotten how long they've been.
16.
Okay, so 8 years. I still have a pile, this high of documents. So I would have to say, living here all this time, for many, many years after these marijuana facilities had opened, of the three categories, I never smelled a thing. And I was happy about that because the smell makes me sick, frankly. But it seems like over the last year or so, as I'm out and about, driving around town, not in Turnigan, I'm smelling them. And just literally last weekend, we were driving on Tudor, turned from Minnesota to Tudor, driving east, and within about a block or so, we started smelling it heavy. You know, windows rolled up, driving speed limit, and it went on till we were almost at Old Seward. So it was difficult to know, you know, I didn't complain, but it was difficult to know how many facilities we may have driven past that were emanating that really obviously strong smell. I'm wondering if you guys in your jobs have received more complaints about smell in the recent past versus more of the past, because I don't know if it's because operators are getting a little, hey, we're good, or, you know, and skipping, you know, process, relaxing their diligence about following that. But I can tell you, when everything that code was written and all the public input, smell was the one thing we said can't happen. We don't want our city to smell like a big pop shop.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid it's creeping to that level, but this is purely anecdotal. So I'm curious if your level of.
So I personally haven't received any complaints to the clerk's office. Typically, those go to code enforcement directly. And we don't know about the complaints unless it gets elevated to an actual citation. So the process is the code enforcement receives a complaint. They, at some point near that complaint, or maybe a couple of times after, will go to the location and conduct an inspection. And they document what they find. And if they do find odor, and it's usually, they say at least 2 officers have to go, then it gets elevated to a violation. If they don't smell it, then nothing comes of it. So it's kind of, I think the smell has been a really hard thing to document and to cite, because it is so changing with wind and time, and so I don't really know the answer to that. At the Community and Economic Development Committee meetings previously, we used to do very regular enforcement reports on marijuana. Code enforcement would show what they had for the quarter or whatever. It dropped off, and at the last CPC meeting, Chair Constant had requested that it start back up again. And so that last meeting was the first one that those quarterly enforcement reports started again. So from that, it didn't show that there was, I think there was one odor. Do you remember, Liza?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one odor violation for the whole year. They did all of 2024 to that point. So other than that, I don't personally have any other information on whether it's increased or not. But that's a hard one.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Mandy, thank you very much for your presentation. Really appreciate the opportunity to ask you
And
questions.
our office is always open for questions, so please feel free to email us, call us. We're happy to help in any way.
And we'll have I have a page on the website, under training, that's council board training, and we're starting to add links for different departments, so there will be one with all the documents, a link to the video of this, as well as the memorandum for marijuana. I'm gonna put into a doc so that you guys can easily grab it, and Mandy and her office's contact information. So trying to make a one-stop shop for all things council, alcohol and marijuana, and try to continue doing these kind of education things and we'll have you back hopefully.
Yeah, we would like to do
year or
this
so that we
regularly.
keep
Um,
doing this.
Yeah, that way we can kind of keep updated on anything new and have more contact with you all too, so.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes.
Al.
Put that in the definition.